is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering King of Scars, chapters 13, 14, and beginning into part 2, The Witch in the Wood, 15. Nina, Zoya, and Nikolai. In these chapters, I don't know what to make of the appearance of a dragon. I don't know what to make of the appearance of actual saints. Everything is confusing. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. And I have to say, I am extremely surprised at the direction this story is going. I am really interested. This is certainly out of left field in its way, but also kind of seems like, looking back, it makes sense that she would do things this way. And it's starting to also become a little bit more clear to me why there was a Grisha Saints book that was released, which looked beautiful, by the way. I don't own any of the books in print. And if I were to, I just buy everything on Kindle now because I prefer reading things mostly from my iPad because I can have everything to hand at once. But there are the occasional books being published lately that I feel like they're beginning to understand that a lot of people purchase books as much for the look as for the content, wanting to have a physical copy of something beautiful. And they've been putting a lot into more foiled and embossed covers and everything. And I seem to remember the cover to the Grisha Saints book being really beautiful. So as much as I feel like I'd still probably buy a Kindle version, that's the first time that I was tempted to buy something that I hadn't already read in hardback. But yeah, these saints that, to jump ahead a little bit, is that really who they are? I really don't know what's happening here. I have to back up. So, starting with Nina's POV. I ship Nina and Hannah. That's all. That's all I have to say about that. Not really, but sincerely, Hannah has a very Matthias sort of feel to her in her way, but also is a little bit, and by Matthias feel, I mean that she seems really practical to the point where she's not great at lying because that part of her personality isn't really as important to her because the skills that she has acquired in the preparation she makes, that is what she relies on more than her acting skills and her ability to improvise, which is what Nina relies on. Not to say that Nina doesn't prepare for things, but she's definitely somebody who I think would feel much more comfortable without extensive preparation. I am a preparer. I'm much more of a Hannah. That's not to say that I'm not a good liar, but lying takes a lot of energy. And I am at my age no longer interested. I used to lie a lot as a teenager because I was always trying to find ways to get out of the house, sneak my boyfriend in, whatever, go do shit I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I was excellent at believing a lie and being very convincing. But once I got to an age where I didn't need to constantly be keeping authority figures in the dark, I just stopped really caring that much. And so I don't lie often. And I don't enjoy it when I have to, Nina, it's just part of what she does. And I don't have a problem with that. I actually find that to be a pretty intriguing part of a character. But I wonder if Hannah's going to improve in terms of her ability to lie, or if it's just going to become a thing that they have to sort of like work around because she will remain bad at it. So yeah, let's see. They're talking about things that they like and dislike. Nina and Hannah took turns dozing, shoulders pressed together, making a show of sleeping as their guards stood by. When both of them were in danger of giving in to exhaustion, they asked each other questions. Favorite sweet, favorite book, favorite pastime. Nina learned that Hannah loved cream buns filled with vanilla custard, had a secret taste for the gruesome novels popular in Ketterdam, the gorier the better, though translations were hard to find, and that she was fond of sewing. And Nina is mystified as to anybody actually enjoying sewing. And even if it's a practical thing that's like, you know, a smart, good skill to have, she's just like, yeah, but enjoying it is different. So eventually they leave. Nina beamed at the men and insisted they make sure to visit Leonard Bjord's house on their way through Overroot. Why can't we escort you now? We'd be delighted, of course, Nina said through gritted teeth. To Nina's surprise, Hannah chimed in. We didn't think you'd want to stop over with us to do our penance for the women of the well. But how wonderful! I understand the sisters there are happy to perform the scod on any male visitors for only a small fee. So it turns out that the scod, even though it's like a rite of passage that's pretty meaningful, is also really grueling. It involves a 3-month vow of celibacy and ritual purging with lye to cleanse the spirit. So it can also kill you. Purging with lye. What? How does that work? Do you mix it with something? Like, just straight up lye burns, right? So, like, how? What? Or is it, does it, like, when I'm hearing purging, I think of it as, like, something that you eat. Because I'm thinking of vomiting. But maybe purging is, like, meant to be metaphorical and you use lye on your skin? Like you burn yourself to cleanse your spirit? Like, it's... And the thing about this is that I have this sort of sense that this is based on something real. And I want to know. I'm very curious about it. I've been listening, you guys, if you've heard of the Calm app, I use the Calm app and the sleep stories to fall asleep. And there's a few of them that are set in various countries. And I was listening to one that was, I think it was like, oh, shit, I can't remember. But it was a train through like Eastern Europe somewhere. And they named a couple of towns that were like 2 syllables away from the names of towns in this book. And it made me realize that probably a lot of what she's like using for names and stuff, she just alters a little thing here and there and it feels completely fresh because we're not very familiar with Eastern Europe, a lot of us, you know? So that's part of what makes me wonder about this ritual and also about like the saints, because like saints there are so many of them that it would be very, very easy to base some fake ones on real ones and nobody would ever make the connection, or it wouldn't feel like it was unoriginal because you know, most of us don't know them. There's a saint for every day of the year and then some, you know, it's ridiculous. So yeah, these guys are like, well, thanks for inviting us, but no, where's his house? Just head to the main square in Overroot. It's the grandest house on the boulevard. Look for the one with the biggest gables, the pointiest in town. I really love that. The pointiest in town. So let's see. So they get to Adric, and he made a great show of seeming incensed about Hannah's trousers, which I am assuming is like him pretending to care, because she says, I thought Zemini didn't care about such things. So I'm thinking that he's doing this as trying for the verisimilitude of the characters they're playing, when he doesn't realize that maybe she knows. But it turns out that like his wife is Zemini, so he's more traditional. He's Kalish. So at this point, they have a little talk, her and Nina, because they're about to separate. And Nina says something about how, like, you know, why didn't your friends come with you when you left anyway? And she says that it's a game to them. They don't, like, understand. And Nina is starting to realize she is genuinely trapped where she's at. These girls, they are much more content being placed where they are. And they want their occasional freedoms. But the convent for them represents like a stability and a home. And for Hannah, it's not like that. This is really somewhere that she doesn't want to be, doesn't enjoy anything really about it. So she asks how old she is, and Hannah is 19. And she says, let's see, if you, oh, right. This is when Nina tells her that she can see how much she wants to just ride off because of her body language, and warns her that if she wants to lie, she's going to need to keep an eye on the way she holds herself, because you can tell a lot by just the movement, the gesture, the way someone's standing, where their eyes go, that it can tell on you when you don't intend it. And at this point, she says, I won't tell anyone what you are. Why? They reward you. Informing on Grisha carries a weight of silver. Why would you be that kind? Because you dove in to save my life when you might have ridden by. And when she says it's a sin, it's poison, if I could rid myself of it, I would. Nina has to really struggle to control herself and be like, I understand, even though she just wants to yell at her and be like, that isn't it. No. And this is the sort of thing that I always wonder how I would do if I were to have to be in a sort of undercover situation where I have to pretend to believe in things that I don't. That takes talking about lying, taking a lot of energy. Pretending to occupy that sort of mindset takes a particular kind of energy that I don't think I would enjoy at all. And it's a real big trope about like cops who have to go undercover winding up fucked up after because of what they did while they were undercover. But I can completely understand how making yourself occupy a role would get in your fucking head, you know? Like, even actors go through that, but for somebody who's actually undercover, you have to inhabit it or else you are going to be killed. It's a much higher stakes situation. And I have, living in Texas and Owen's family being really conservative, I already have to just not talk about things that I believe in. It's not even that I fake it and agree with their beliefs. It's simply me choosing to not say something at any given time. And even that I find really hard and really draining. And I can't imagine something like this, where it's somebody talking about themselves in such like loathing terms and about an aspect of them that you also have. It's, it's like listening to somebody who's body shaming themselves when you're standing next to them, like also fat or fatter, and having to like not get defensive about it. And the whole thing, like Nina finally is like, listen, My sister learned to contain her power, and she found happiness. I remember a great deal from the lessons she received. There was some concern that I might have a latent corruption, and I was taught alongside her. I may be able to help you learn to control your power too. Really, really smart idea. I liked this a lot. So we'll find a way for you to make it up to me. Get a last ride in before the next snow comes. Hannah looked startled, almost disbelieving, then dug her heels into her horse's flanks. So then we go to her and Adric, and she is just kind of overwhelmed with everything that has happened, and she's thinking about it all, and her head is sort of like swimming. And Leonie calls them over, and she's sitting on this stool. She'd set up a small camp stove, and the space around her was littered with pots and glass vials that she had been using to test the water samples. So Nina notices that she doesn't look too good. And Nina says, hey, let's go to town for lunch. And Leonie stands up suddenly. And all of a sudden, her eyes roll back in her head. And she starts to fall like she's going to faint. And she is soaked in sweat, but her skin is livid, like she is definitely feverish. And she says, I think I botched the testing. I was trying to pull the pollutants from the samples to isolate them. I may have absorbed some into my body. I told you poisons are tricky work. And she offers, Nina does, to take her to the dorms and get her some clean water and fix things up. And she's like, no, they're going to get suspicious about why I'm having this reaction. So she tells them to get some charcoal and add a few drops to the water, and it'll absorb the toxins. And I had, guys, when I was a kid, one of my cats ate a poison mushroom, and I had to force feed him charcoal to absorb it. And I'll tell you what, trying to force feed a cat charcoal, first of all, not fun. And second of all, that cat walks around with charcoal around his mouth for a week. And it is never not hilarious. He just looks like he's got this weird beard or a mustache. It was really hilarious. So this is when she tells them the well mother came to see her and that one of the girls that they saw in the woods died. And Leonie's like, her injuries weren't that serious. I think it was the river. She was in the water for a while and she had an open wound. And this is when Nina tells them that there are graves all over the mountain. And they're like, why didn't you say anything? And basically she's just like, there was a lot happening and I didn't even know what I was feeling, So at this point, Nina mentions how she got bit by a wolf. And Adric's like, of course you did. But then when she takes her coat off and he sees the bite, he's like, oh shit, I thought you were kidding. And she mentions how there was, she thinks, parem in the wolf bite. And so all of this is adding up to a really sinister scene. They're all starting to get a little bit freaked out. None of this makes sense. And they think about whether or not it's parem that's in the water. And Nina is like, I don't think so. She wouldn't have just died. She would have been and Leonie having the reaction she's having when she's Grisha, she would want more. She would be doing something with the samples to try and get more exposure out of it. But she's not. She's fainting and sick. So it doesn't seem to be the same sorts of symptoms. So let's see. I heard the dead speak. I heard them all the way back in Elling. They need our help. I realize I sound like I've gone loopy, but we need to get inside that factory, and I think I know someone who can help. Nina brought Leonie back to the dormitories before nightfall and got her tucked into bed. Her fever had broken, and she was already feeling better. Further proof that whatever she'd found in the water was not parem. So what was wrong with those wolves, and what had been in their bite, and what had killed the novitiate? Keep seeing that word and being like, how do I think it's novitiate. So the next morning, she goes to see the well mother. And I love this because when she goes, Adric is sort of cautioning her about how easy it would be for Nina to ruin her cover. And she has done a lot of spying and playing roles. So she's a little bit insulted at him being patronizing like this, which I completely understand. But also, she has been more emotionally fragile lately. And there is a connection personally to what's going on here with her like new power and hearing the dead that I think she's underestimating her attachment to the outcome. And I just think that she isn't really understanding the extent of her own feelings in this whole scenario. So I kind of understand his concerns, even though I definitely understand her point of view and her feeling insulted about it. There's a part of me that's kind of like, he may have a point though, Nina, like, be careful. And there is a moment later where she's instructing Hannah and Hannah's like, wow, you really remember a lot. And she realizes maybe she's taken it a little bit too far and needs to dial it back. Like, she is getting a little bit caught up. Teaching a new Grisha who thinks that they are an abomination how to control their power while they hate themselves, that's very personal. You know, that is a very different situation than the other sorts of grifts that she has participated in. So I feel like as much as she has done a lot of this type of thing before, the stakes in this feel different. And I wouldn't be surprised if it caused her to veer off track more than she would ever expect she'd be capable of doing. So she goes and convinces the well mother that she's going to do this. She's framing it as teaching her a language, Zemini, that she would do this in exchange for a reference from the well mother when she tries to go, become a tutor or a teacher to other Fjerdans. Because the well mother won't accept that she's just going to do this out of the generosity of her own heart. She's a practical, shrewd woman who is like, that seems too generous. You want something. So she has to come up with something. And it's very convincing. The well mother preened her chin lifting. Piety was little defense against flattery. Well, I can see how that might be a boon. So it's a relief to see Hannah interested in anything that doesn't involve a muddy romp in the woods. I expect you to keep up with your other work, Hannah. Your father will not like it if you become a burden to this institution. So the well mother leaves, and then we get a little bit of history of Hannah. And she talks about how her father raised her to be like an outdoorsy, hunting, basically a sportsman. And that when it came time for her to be at court, all of the things that he taught her were an embarrassment. And this is the kind of thing that, I'm covering Song of Ice and Fire with Rashawn, and we've talked before about how if Arya and Sansa's situations were reversed, they would each be dead. Sansa trying to live on the streets of King's Landing and then make it up, what's the word I want? Basically out in the Riverlands when it's just war torn and everything. And she's literally having to eat bugs because they can't find food and keep her mouth shut and take her blows. Sansa could not have done that. But Arya would never have been able to make it in Sansa's place, pretending to be a lady of the court. And when you read this kind of fiction, a lot of times a character like Arya or like Hannah, they would be put into a court situation and everybody would be sort of like, even though there's a majority of people who find her tasteless, vulgar, and who disdain her, there would be a contingent that admire her or find her fun. And she would find a niche that she could exploit within that court framework. But in reality, that didn't happen often. You know, it was an exceptional personality that was able to like simultaneously satisfy social requirements and also just kind of bulk and do what you want. That's not a common thing to pull off. And so the fact that Hannah just doesn't really, you know, she says, when it was time to present me at court, I couldn't shake it off. Unnatural, they called me. A woman's body is meant to be soft, but mine was hard. A lady is meant to take small, graceful steps, but I strode. I was a laughingstock. My father blamed himself for corrupting me. I couldn't sing or paint, but I could clean a deer and string a bow. I could build a shelter. And this kind of thing, like, it's one thing to be like, oh, people disapproved of me. But when you call her a laughingstock, I feel like that's a very distinct thing to say that grants the whole image in your head it casts a different light on all of it, you know? Having it be that everybody was laughing at her because she was like a dude is a very different energy that I feel like it would be much harder to work past. And I appreciate the author, like, making it clear that it's not that she just decided to, like, bail because she was unhappy and she couldn't take it. It was her father being like, it was just embarrassing for him, you know? This school was supposed to make me presentable, good marriage material. If the well mother can't fix me, I'll never be allowed to go home, never be presented at court. It should have happened 2 years ago. And Nina asks her at one point, like, because she could just live like an exile and never go back, but she would never see her parents again. I find a way to fit in, or I take vows and live the rest of my life out here. And I then says, I wish I was an Inferni so I could melt the ice court from the inside out. And if you could do anything, what would you choose? Novi Zem. I'd get a job, make my own money, hire myself out as a sharpshooter. And she says, well, then why not just do it? And she says, I couldn't do that to my parents. I couldn't shame them that way. And Nina is like, oh, right. She's just not used to the kind of like value structure that Fjerdans have. And this is something that I constantly run up against personally, where I have to like recontextualize things in my mind when I'm talking to certain people, because I realize that they just don't value the things I value. And I don't value what they do either. You know, it's a mutual thing. What we each prioritize in our lives and what motivates us are just so incredibly different that I have to like stop and consciously make an effort to see from their point of view. So I liked this conversation, and I liked Nina sort of just being like, well, then just go do it. And she has like to her a legitimate reason why she would never do it. It's not just her being like hemmed in by society and not wanting disapproval. It would shame her parents to a point that socially they would feel consequences. It would be potentially her never being able to see them again. Like there would be lasting repercussions to it that are real and deserve to be treated seriously. And I just, you know, I appreciated that. So this ends with Nina saying, like, you could get caught running around out in trousers, and Hannah being like, I know every single step that creaks. I know where the cook stashes the keys to the kitchen door. I have changes of clothes and pinafores stored everywhere in this building and out. I will never get caught. So, yeah, I like that. So then we go to Zoya. And Zoya is in a bad place, kids. She's having a hard time. And honestly, I really enjoyed this. This is the kind of thing, I think some of it comes with age as well. There have been a lot of stories that I've read as a teen and my early 20s where somebody would have a really emotional reaction to something. And for me, it wouldn't really hit, you know? And sometimes it's because I was just too young to really understand why this would be as upsetting as it was. Or it would be, the stakes would suddenly be ramped so high, like they'd have an emotional reaction to a sudden death. And it would just be something I couldn't really relate to because that's just such a dramatic event. But this moment with Zoya, where she begins to lose control because they are actively rewriting history, is so deeply relatable to me, especially lately. Anybody who has undergone a major shift in their perception of our society and our country and our world over the past decade or so knows what it's like to feel that flash of rage when somebody just decides to say some shit that's so backward and ignorant that you can't believe anybody still thinks this way, or that they would be so foolish as to believe something so absurd. I feel this all the time. I am constantly in a low-level rage. It's part of why I've been trying to avoid Facebook, because I find myself growing angry so frequently when I am on Facebook that I just don't see it really being worth it. And that's regarding stuff that happened oftentimes like a long time ago, or just happened recently, but to people that I don't know. I cannot imagine how I would react to people trying to rewrite the history of events that I was there to see personally. I would lose my ever-loving mind. I just straight up, the mere idea of it. I mean, this is the thing that happens with people all the time who try and levy accusations against somebody for the way that they were treated for perhaps like an assault, and they're not believed. And they have to watch the person they're accusing pretend a whole other thing happened. And I have never personally been in that position, but I can just see myself grow incandescent. And the way that Zoya reacts here is just deeply, deeply reasonable to me. I get it. And as much as I understand what a bad situation she was putting everybody in and why Nikolai is so frustrated with her, I am not mad at her at all. Honestly, I relate so much to so many parts of Zoya's personality. And her decision to just fucking go off, even though it's a super bad idea, is a major one. I like to think that as I've gotten slightly older, I've grown better at maintaining a calm and reasonable mindset in the face of rage. But I wasn't great at managing that shit in my mid-20s, and I did some stupid things that could have gotten me in a lot more trouble than they did. And just due to this rage that was not directed in any particular, so this whole scene killed me a little bit because I felt for her so much. And these people she's speaking with are so frustrating. So they're in Krybiersk, and she's looking at everything and thinking about Alina and how initially she had seen Alina as a rival and was sort of jealous of her, but then eventually began to understand that she didn't that Alina had been put under such pressure, and that the only way to get out of it was literally to fake her death. And just began to sort of think better of wanting to be like that. Let's see. Though the symbol crowning the church's entry had changed, its outer walls remained the same. They were covered in the names of the dead, victims of the Darkling slaughter of Novokrybyersk, Krybiersk's sister city, the town that had once lain almost directly across the Shadowfold. One day those words will fade to nothing. The people who mourn the dead would be gone too. I'll be gone. Who will remember them then? After all this time, she still had not found an end to her grief. It was a dark well, an echoing place into which she'd once cast a stone, sure that it would strike bottom and she would stop hurting. Instead, it just kept falling. She forgot about the stone, forgot about the well, sometimes for days or even weeks at a time. Then she would think Liliana's name, or her eye would pause on the little boat painted on her bedroom wall, its 2-starred flag frozen in the wind. She'd sit down to write a letter and realize she had no one to write to, and the quiet that surrounded her became the silence of the well, of the stone falling. Ugh, you guys, I'm like tearing up just reading that. Is that just like the most beautiful writing? She's disgusting. Ugh, Lee Bardugo. I can't believe how much like you have improved as a writer. I swear to God, it's wild. So moving forward beyond that, she sent Genya and David a coded missive with the essentials of the Cairgud attacked and instructions to double the sorties patrolling the skies around Osalta. And then Nikolai, let's see, one of Tamar's sources claims there are rumors a member of the Shu Royal Guard wants to defect. The party will be the perfect opportunity to make contact. So that's interesting. I wonder if that's anything or if it's like a trap of some kind. I don't know. So there were times like this when they worked side by side, when the rhythm between them was so easy that her mind would turn traitor. Ooh, sorry, I kicked something under my desk. She would look at the tousle of Nikolai's gilded head bent over some correspondence, or his long fingers tearing into a roll, and she would wonder what it would be like when he finally married, when he belonged to someone else, and she lost these moments of peace. Zoya would still be Nikolai's general, but she knew it would be different. He would have someone else to tease and lean on and argue over the herring with. She'd made men fall in love with her before, when she was young and cruel and liked to test her power. Zoya did not desire. She was desired, and that was the way she liked it. It was galling to admit she wasn't at all sure she could make Nikolai want her, and more galling to think that a part of her longed to try, to know if he was as impervious to her beauty as he seemed, to know if someone like him, full of hope and light and optimistic endeavor, could love someone like her. Too relatable. When she was young and cruel and liked to test her power, hit a little bit too close to home for me. Yeah. But she keeps this very carefully under control, and she knows there is no way in hell this country will ever accept a Grisha queen. It's just not possible. And honestly, I wouldn't want to be a queen to these people, and I appreciate her being that practical and understanding this. And there's no it's not exactly longing. It's just this vague sort of, idea that she clamps down on quickly. And I know that exact mindset where you're not actively crushing on somebody because you are consciously clamping the budding crush and keeping it from expanding at all. So it's there, and if you gave it any room, it would absolutely just open and flourish. But you don't, and you're really careful about it. And that is a very familiar place that I think a lot of us have been. So this is when they go out with Yuri to the fold. And they see this huge dark shape that looks like a shadow of a cloud, as if there's a cloud passing over the sun. But there's no clouds in the sky at all. Zoya saw the shape on the horizon was not a body of water, but a gleaming black disk of stone, at least a mile across, perfectly round and shiny as a mirror. "This is the place where the Starless One fell," said Yuri, reverence in his voice. Was it? Zoya couldn't be sure. The battle was a memory of violet flames and fear. And this is when it starts to go left. Yuri's like, the Starless One stood on this spot and dared to recreate the experiments of the Bonesmith. And Zoya's like, oh yeah, he dared and ripped the fucking world up. And how can you know the fold was not a challenge the saints set before the Darkling? He violated the natural order. But who created the natural order? This whole like back and forth. Oh my God. It's awful to read. And I'm just so firmly on her team, of course, because I read what actually went down. So this man comes forward. Welcome, fellow pilgrims. I am just one more among the faithful. And when she asks, why do you worship him? He loved Ravka. He wanted only to make us strong and save us from weak kings. Who is Ravka? What is Ravka? Did the Darkling love my aunt who died beside countless innocent civilians in Novokrbir so that he could show the world his might? Did he love the girl he forced to commit those murders? What about the girl he tossed into the old king's bed for his own purposes, then mutilated when she dared to challenge him? Or the woman he blinded for failing to offer him unswerving devotion? Great men are often the victims of the lies told by their enemies. What saint has walked among us who did not face hardships in his life? Ah, great men are often the victims of the lies of their enemies. Oh, oh, it made me so angry. I can't even, you guys, like, I really twitched. I twitched hard. Where is the shrine to my aunt, to Saint Harsha, to Sergei, or Marie, or Fedor? Who will worship them and light candles in their names? Amen, sister. So she tries to calm herself. She couldn't breathe. Her head felt heavy and blurred as she let Nikolai pull her onto the skiff. The junior squallers had already left their post to get a better look at the black stone. Nikolai signaled to the twins. So, at this point, she pushes up her sleeves, and Nikolai says they'll claim the site is holy and can't be touched, or they'll want to dig themselves to locate objects for their altars. Zoya didn't care what the pilgrims wanted. If she had to look at them and their black banners another minute, she thought she might well lose her mind. She's having a PTSD episode. That's what's going on. She is having a fucking reaction. She's been triggered, and no fucking wonder. And she says, they want darkness? I'll give it to them. All it took was the barest twist of her wrists, and the sands shifted, forming ripples, then dunes, rising higher and higher. She saw Genya huddled in her black shawl, her arms thick with scars. She saw Harsha dead in the sand, his red hair like a fallen flag. Zoya's nostrils were full of the scent of bergamot and blood. Zoya, stop this, Nikolai hissed. The pilgrims shouted to one another, taking shelter. They scattered and ran. There's your saint, she said with grim satisfaction. Enough, Zoya. That's an order. She let the sands drop. A wave of dizziness struck her, and for a moment the world seemed to flicker and warp. Her knees buckled, and she fell hard to the deck of the skiff, frightened by the surge of nausea that had overcome her. Nikolai seized her arm. Are you... And then he seemed to stumble too, eyes rolling back in his head. Yuri vomited over the railing. What just happened? What? Zoya turned in a slow circle. The camp was gone. The tents, the gleaming stone, this blue sky had bled away to gray twilight. Where are Toya and Tamar? What happened? I didn't do anything, Zoya protested. It was a little storm. No one was in any danger. Am I having some kind of episode? Said Nikolai. Or are you seeing this too? Above them loomed a palace wrought from the same bone-colored sand as the fold. But it was less a palace than a city. A massive structure that rose in arches and peaks, clouds roiling around its highest spires. There was something in its construction that reminded her of the bridge at Yvette's. A shriek sounded from somewhere in the distance. "It's a miracle," said Yuri, falling to his knees. Another shriek sounded, then another, and a rumble of thunder followed as dark shapes seemed to break from the palace, moving toward them at incredible speed. "It's not a miracle," said Nikolai. "It's a trap." So this is when we start Book 2, The Witch in the Wood, Chapter 15, and we go to Nikolai's perspective. And he is watching, thinking that this is Volcra. The shriek, it sounds like them. And he's almost wondering if maybe, the Darkling is resurrected. He doesn't know what to think. And then he sees bees. A shifting and clustering into what might have been the shape of a woman. Behind the swarm, a grotesque loped over the sand, a massive body that kept forming and reforming. 2 heads, then 3, 1,000 arms, a humped back with a spine that twisted in sinuous ridges, 10, 20, 30 long spindly legs moving in tandem. The forms were human one moment, animal the next, thick with fur and gnashing teeth. And there, circling high above, a third monstrosity, wings wide and scales gleaming. It's a dragon. Guys, I wasn't ready. Because hearing that it's got wide wings and it's got scales, I just wasn't thinking dragon. I don't know what I was thinking, but it wasn't dragon. So when it says, yes, impossible, but they're nonetheless, the dragon, vast in size, I was like, wait. Just once you introduce a dragon, this changes my whole view of this universe. That's just, now we're doing something else. It's a whole different thing. That's just, this is where my line in the sand is. Once you add dragons to your universe, it's all shifting. I don't know why that's the thing, but that's the thing. So, Nikolai opened fire at the grotesque. His bullets struck its shifting body. All of his bullets were absorbed, then emerged a second later as if the writhing flesh had simply spat them out. High above, the dragon roared and spread its enormous wings. A fountain of flame erupted from the beast's mouth and blasted toward them. So Zoya uses a dome of air to keep the fire off of them, and the dragon gives up. And the grotesque says, "Lay down your arms." And Nikolai's like, I don't think so. So Zoya's like, "I'll raise the sands and we can make cover and get out of here." And Nikolai's like, "Okay, that seems like a good plan." So she attempts to camouflage them using that. Nikolai holstered his revolver, seized the lines, releasing the sail, and they take off. And then suddenly, the ground begins to buckle. The skiff listed precariously as one of its runners peeled away from the sand. Nikolai held tight to the lines, trying to use the storm to help right the skiff, but the ground was bucking like a wild animal. They landed in a heap. A shape emerged out of the sand before them, another and another and another. A regiment of sand soldiers. They were faceless, but their uniforms were elaborately detailed. They stretched to the horizon. And Zoya is genuinely like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. I can't fight this. Do we just die then? What is this? And I just, again, her reaction is just fair. I have no plan of action, so I guess we just do our best before we get murdered, probably. So, the dragon turned sharply in the air and dove for them. She knocks him into the sand, braces before him, and raises her arms. The dragon unleashed its fire, and Zoya let loose the storm. For a moment, they seemed evenly matched, a golden cascade of flame buffeted by a wall of wind. Then Zoya swept her arms in a loop and cast them to the sides like a conductor concluding a symphony. For a moment, Nikolai didn't understand, but then the flames collapsed. The dragon reared back, a choked wheeze emerging from its throat. Zoya had stolen its breath. She'd banished the air from the fire, depriving it of fuel, and left the dragon gasping. Is that the raddest? What a great idea. She's just like, yeah, I think I will just take your breath out of your lungs, actually. That sounds like a way to combat this. Yes, it does. Good for you. So then the dragon gets its fire back. It gets its groove back. Blue flame, hotter than it was before. And again, this badass moment. Blue fire lit her face. Her hair rose like a black crown around her head, and her eyes blazed cobalt as if she too burned with the dragon's fire. Zoya screamed as the dragon's flames pounded against the force of her power. She gritted her teeth, and Nikolai saw beads of sweat bloom on her brow. He opened fire on the dragon, but his bullets seemed to melt before they even came near the creature's scales. Ice crystallized on the fallen skiff, coated Nikolai's hands and the ranks of the sand soldiers surrounding them, and then Zoya collapsed. I just love her so much. She's just like, I'm gonna fucking go for it. Listen, if we die, it's not gonna be because I didn't try until I literally collapsed. Like, good for her. I just love her so much. So, the boy king, said the dragon, the war hero, the prince with a demon curled inside his heart. If I wanted to harm her, she would be ashes, boy. So would you all. It sure looked like you wanted to harm her, or is that how your kind says a friendly hello? I wanted to see what she could do. So then, she begins to wail and cry, and reaches up to her chest, and when he forces her fingers open, he sees that the silver cuff, her amplifier, has shattered. And honestly, when I read that, I was so angry. Like, she's already just been through so much. Don't do this. Don't take that from her. Rude. And when she says no and the dragon says yes, I was like, ew. Go away. Who asked you? You're not part of this. I mean, he is part of this because, like, but still, fuck you. And this woman who is covered in fucking bees steps forward and tells Juris to stop. And I'm like, that's not good enough. Tell Juris to replace her amplifier. Come on. So the dragon heaved its shoulders, and before Nikolai's bewildered eyes, shifted and shrank, becoming a towering man in finely wrought chainmail that glittered like black scales. What is this? Who are you? Do the people not pray for saints? Asked the man called Juris. At last, wept Yuri, still kneeling. At last. And Nikolai is realizing that this woman who that Juris called Elizaveta, Sancta Elizabeta, who had been martyred in a field of roses, Sanct Juris, who slew the dragon. You slew the dragon, said Nikolai. It's in all the stories. Sometimes the stories are rough on the details. Come, boy king. It's time we talked. And that's the end of the chapter. What? I am bewildered. He slayed the dragon? Evidently not. Apparently he was the dragon. Maybe he made it look like he slayed the dragon. What can they do for Nikolai? And what happened? Like, you know, Yuri threw up. Nikolai almost... He almost passed out. What caused them to get... They've been clearly transported to like a parallel dimension somehow. What triggered that? Was it Zoya using her abilities so close to one? Like, I have a lot of questions. I don't know what to make of it. Like, and she says something about how the castle that they're seeing, or like the city, I guess, looks so much like the bridge. But the bridge is permanent. It's there. It's, you know, this is something that they're seeing in, again, what feels like another dimension. And I can't make any sense of it. Like these, how is this like the afterlife? Like, I just genuinely, I don't even, this is so far out that I don't even really have a theory. You know, it's wild. And it's just such a departure from the tone of the rest of the books. And not in a bad way. I am just completely thrown off. I don't know what to make of it. I'm really interested. Like, I'm super excited to see what happens next. But I don't understand what is causing these saints to get involved. They're, you know, Elisabetta, is that what he said her name? But she says something like, enough jurists, they know now what they're up against, which I guess she means like, they're not going to keep trying to fight us, but there's a sense to that of her being like, they're going to understand their situation more fully now, which to me sounds like, oh, we're about to tell you some bad news, you know, like there's a whole other thing going on here. I don't know what could be, because like, I keep thinking about Alina. She's as close to a saint as we've seen in person in any of these books. She didn't like being called a saint. She didn't really consider herself a saint, but everybody else did. And yet we know that she like didn't actually die. She's out living her life. Why, though, did her sacrifice not cause her to turn up here where the rest of them are? If she dies, will she become part of this community? What? Like, she doesn't have her ability anymore, but would that matter? I don't know. I don't know what to think. And the fact that Yuri, like, Toya and Tamar were walking away, is that by design? Did they want Toya and Tamar to not turn up here? Or were they just like accidentally not nearby and so they didn't get swept up in the whole transport that it seems like happened? And will they believe, like, does it look like they're gone on Toya and Tamar's end? Like, did they turn around and the skiff has disappeared? Or will this crew be put back with, like, in a Narnia sense where it's like they were never gone? I have so many questions about this. I don't know. So yeah, everything is different. Whole different situation. I'm very excited though. You know, I'm very interested. So, all right, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you again very much to Joanna for commissioning this. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to continue. Thank you to all of you for listening. I hope you're enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.